I think I'll go ahead and ask Jacqueline to come on the floor and give us a presentation. But just before she does that, in Kenya, we have heard about the Vision 2030. I don't know how many of us have read it or have interacted with it.
Zippy,
So,
I'm okay now.
you're okay?
Yes.
All right, you want to go?
Please.
Right, we're waiting for you. So answer those questions in the next 1 second.
I answered the poll. I hope that wasn't cheating.
Jacqueline, you're cheating.
I'm sorry. If you put a poll in front of me and you give me an instruction, I just obey the instruction.
Terms and conditions apply. Jacqueline and Paul are disqualified from answering.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Are we done? 30 seconds to go. Have we all responded? We have 38 wonderful people on the floor. So we expect at least 35 responses. Okay, can we see the results? %83% suggest that the meaning of ESG is environmental, social, and governance. 17% say it is effective, sustainable governments. And nobody answers for it's neither electrified nor is it effective. So we have two. So we'll expect our panelists to tell us whether we picked the correct answer. Thank you very much for that. Now quickly, so I was talking about the Vision 2030. I don't know how many of us have interacted with that document. It talks about 4 pillars to the vision. One is economic, the other one is social, there is political, and there's what we call the micros. The team before us this morning is going to help us translate, relate, associate, and know what we ought to do and what we need to do. So I will welcome now Jacqueline to dive in about 20 minutes and educate us and let us know whether we answered correctly or not. Jacqueline, take the mic.
Thank you. And thank you so much for that introduction. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can.
And it's just the one slide?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for that introduction. When you started to talk about the first, I thought, am I in the right room? But it was okay. Okay. It is a privilege to be here with my cousins from the East African region. I bring you greetings from women on boards in West Africa, in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And I'm hoping that as I share some of what I've learned, some of what we're trying to do, we will see a synergy there. So I'm just going to present very quickly, but I'm really looking forward to the interactive session where we can talk a little bit more about different things that I'm hoping will be of use to you, the participants on this call. So I'm hoping to cover 3 things very quickly, just a little bit about ESG, what and why, and I'm trying to bring the dimension closer to home, closer to our part of the world, and the 3 pillars, and then offer you some thoughts, which are my opinions on why I feel the central pillar, I'm calling them pillars, the social pillar actually binds, why I feel it takes center stage, and we can continue those discussions. So ESG, what and why? Environmental, social, and governance. So most of you were right. What ESG stands for, it's a set of standards for companies' operations that socially conscious investors use to screen potential investments. It's used by investors to evaluate the behavior of companies as well as determining their future financial performance. So these are kind of big words. What do they mean? In my mind, I think it's basically asking three questions. So if an organization like the International Finance Corporation, that I do a lot of work with, they're looking to invest, say, in a company in Sierra Leone that is in the mining sector, because we have a lot of minerals, it asks the questions. This company, how well do they do with environmental issues? This company, how good are they on social matters? This company, how good is their governance? Why? Because there is the risk that an investor has once their name is associated with a particular company. So they want to ask these questions. That doesn't mean that they won't necessarily invest, but it means that it gives them an opportunity to manage the risk and say, are we going to then need to do more on compliance with environmental issues or compliance with social matters? Are we going to go onto this board and try and up the stake? And I think this is the more important thing. So if we move away from the words, it's basically allowing an investor to say, where's this company now? Where would I like it to be? And what do we want to do in relation to particular issues within the company? Okay. So when we look at these three pillars, we're considering how does this company perform as a steward of nature? So if it is a mining company, for instance, we know that there are issues with mining companies and the communities and the how the mining might affect that local area. So what does the company do to either mitigate the adverse impact on that area, or what does it do to try and either promote environmental issues, good practice? The social criteria, which for me is a central pillar, it manages relationships with stakeholders. It manages relationships with employees, suppliers, customers, and communities. I am passionate about the relationship with communities because I feel that in many parts of Africa, certainly in the two countries in West Africa that I've got a lot of dealings with, there are community issues that companies are, I think, the social conscience of companies should allow them or should almost force them to think a little bit more about. And in addition to that, on the social criteria, there's also best practice policies globally and indeed local laws that look at the social criteria. And then governance talks about the company's leadership. So things around controls, shareholder rights, particularly minority shareholder rights. And of course, when we talk about minority shareholder rights, it's almost the anti-bullying so that the majority shareholders don't leave the minority shareholders out. And for me, governance is also about taking ownership for the other two, so the environmental and the social bits. I hope that's making sense so far. So the three pillars globally, these are the sorts of areas that ESG would cover. It would look at environmental issues around waste and pollution, resource depletion. So resource depletion was the example I was giving you, say, with the mining companies, greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation. Deforestation is a really big issue for Sierra Leone. We have seen the floods, we have seen so many things, and deforestation is something that we are now trying to redress. And then of course, climate change and the issues for climate change, which when you combine with deforestation for a place like Sierra Leone, we actually see that the man on the street who's never heard of ESG, who's never heard of environmental issues, is being impacted. And when we talk about the man on the street, we usually also mean very much the women who are stakeholders of family matters and all of these sorts of things. So the social are about employee relations, diversity, working conditions, local communities, health and safety, conflict, etc. And governance, as I said before, some of the more relevant issues in relation to executives. Now, as I said before, when we look at things like this social pillar, we ask questions about how does a company treat people? How does it treat its employees? What are the working conditions that it has put in place? Are they the best? What about local communities, health and safety, conflict, etc.? And when we are looking at some of these areas in the social pillar, regardless of ESG, we might be able to look at the company and say, how is it doing on this social bit? And that's why I said, when we look at the social pillar interacts very much with the environmental pillar as well as with the governance pillar. So for me, if we were bolding, we would be bolding that social pillar. Okay, so when we move then into this social pillar, for me, I think that there's a couple of things that we want to mention. So as I said before, the social pillar, where it's looking at employees, it's looking also at governance, it's looking at diversity, it's looking at equity and inclusion. So it's asking questions like, how many women do you have on the board? How diverse is the board? What is the age thing? I mean, the people in Sierra Leone are a little bit tired of me saying this, but in a country like Sierra Leone, indeed Liberia, where I think it's something like over 75% of the population is over 35, how many people on the boards are age over 50 or 55? I'm sure Nairobi should be asking itself that question, because are we including some of these people? How are we on social rights? Do people have social rights? And are the social rights where we want them to be as board members, as potential investors? If not, are we the organs of social change that is needed to bring that company, to bring that sector, to bring that country forward and make the strides? Are we those social change agents that are needed? And when we're asking ourselves questions about ESG, it matters, it makes a difference. So when we're reporting, and we'll talk about reporting, and I think my colleague Paul will talk about reporting on these issues, whether we call them ESG or not, I think is something that people might want to hear and people want to know about. So bringing it back home, the Sustainable Development Goals, which many of you already know about and have seen, which came after the Millennium Development Goals. And it's interesting, the Sustainable Development Goals basically picked things up at a point where the Millennium Development Goals hadn't been as 100% successful. So there's certain issues for Africa, for parts of Africa, which I think we can relate to. And I was having this conversation with Zippy, and we were saying, you know, things like education matter, things like equality matter. In our parts of the world, things like, you know, health and sanitation are a real issue for the communities and even in certain parts of the city. And therefore, if we're a company, for a stakeholder of a company, they matter, they make a difference. Couple of things that you might find interesting. There's been a recent publication in the Guardian, which is a newspaper in the UK, and it's globally, where they were talking about the eco-gender gap. Why is saving the planet seen as women's work? And what they were saying there is we can talk about the environmental issues, but it is often the women, be they the community leaders, be they the women on boards or women in businesses, particularly women leading their own small businesses, that are the ones that are really fronting this issue of saving the planet. And it comes back to what I said earlier about some of these sustainable development goals around sanitation, around climate change, etc. And going back to the work with the IFC are passionate about this. They invest, they have a brand risk when they invest. So they're always looking at the impact of the organizations, the companies that they're investing in, and the communities. So there's quite a lot of IFC publication, and I'm just mentioning one here. Sustainable communities through improved business practice. So ESG also has that mandate about how can we use some of these ESG concepts and factors to really improve business practice within the organizations that we're part of, organizations that we might want to invest in. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say, but just before I finish, I just wanted to maybe spend a minute and talk about say a little bit more about the company in Sierra Leone that I was part of. So the IFC invested in this company. And one of the first things that they did was they looked at where the company was, the community that the company operates in, and they looked at the laws. And one of the things that I was doing with them was, first of all, it was about legal compliance. Because it's mining, we need to make sure that the Minings and Minerals Act, the laws that pertain in Sierra Leone are adhered to. So that's a governance bit, because if we don't do legal compliance, then essentially that company might end up being sanctioned in the courts. Following on from that legal compliance, there's best practice. So do the communities know their rights? Back to that social change thing, do they know their rights? As a company, are we doing the best for those communities? So as we were working together, when COVID came, we then had to do more with those communities because the girl child, the women were being impacted. They weren't able to have as much autonomy in their businesses. So the social pillar there came into the fore because we had to make sure that there was those things there, as well as employee rights within the organization. And the employee rights weren't just about women, but they were also about the men. So we had to do training. We had to make sure that the reporting that the board was getting was appropriate. We had to make sure that the strategies, and when I say we, I wasn't necessarily as involved in that the strategies that the board had were the best ones, because as I said before, there is this risk. So ESG, even if you take away the words ESG, many of us are thinking about these things. But what this invites us to do is think a little bit more, maybe look at other areas and ask ourselves the question, have we really recognized the opportunity we have to use these concepts and reporting to our advantage? And I'd like to leave it there. I think that's my 20 minutes up. Zippy, is that right? And I look forward to your questions and comments and your input. And I will, of course, take away some nuggets from here back to the cousins in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. She never disappoints. Those of us who attended last year, we had her. She's our sister on the other side. Now, Jacqueline has given us a few takeaways from where I am. She said that nothing stands by its own. There is synergy. There's synergy in this room. There's synergy in all the pillars. So she's getting out of the silo mentality. We need to partner. We need to collaborate with the pillars so that we can have a just and unfair society. She's asked us a question. Why central? Why does it matter? I think for me, that's a call to action as I live here. ESG, she has told us that there are standards that are set. She has given us an explanation. And just before I go on, I want to let you know that we will get the notes at the end of this session so that we can interrogate and enrich ourselves. Jacqueline has told us the relationship between the environment, the social, and the governance. So none of us in this room is standing on one without the other. They are interlinked, they are interrelated. Jacqueline has also told us to think this is where we are and there's a future we want to go. What do we do between? So we have the A, we are going to Z, but there is a B to Y. What is your action point between B to Y? She has talked about the DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. We are going to ask ourselves, how fair, diverse, how equitable in our workspaces are we? Are we promoting this? Are we not promoting this? She's brought the issue of age. We don't want boards that are full of old people, replacing old men with old women. We want diversity. So that needs to be played in a deliberate way. Jacqueline has asked us a few questions, and I'm going to ask us to think about them in call to action. What do we do about deforestation? I watched a clip in BBC about a woman who uses charcoal to cook, and she's being told about COP26. That is just a concluded conference. And she says this is all she has to do. She hasn't been to school like you and me, but she does the most fantastic food. So as Paul comes to speak, we will need to know the role of deforestation and charcoal, industrialization, and whether oil and gas is doing anything to make delivery of that service affordable. Because there isn't a suitable substitute, then we are going to talk. And then what can we do about that? Are we investing in our people? Are we investing in our people? They are the currency of any institution. Where deliberately, what coins are we putting in our people? In their health, in their well-being, in their safety, as they come and live at the workplaces. We're also talking about reorganizing and recognizing the opportunities that are before us. So there may be a number of things we haven't done. Jacqueline is telling us the time is now. I will be reading out the questions at the next session, but I'm going to invite Paul. If your belts are not tight, please tighten them. You will be so interested, like I am, to see the relationship between a banker, sustainability, and climate carbon rating. Paul, please take the mic.
Thank you very much, Zippy. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning from where you're listeners. And thank you, Jacqueline, for laying up the ground so well. And thank you for inviting me to this session. I think diversity is winning today. So thank you so much for that. I will start from a question that I've seen on the chart, that does this means that ESG frameworks are becoming more important to companies and investors? And I will be answering those two questions. So if you can bring up my slides.
Okay, all right.
Good. So as my slides come up, and within the 20 minutes that I got, I would like to cover two areas. So one is inform you of a report that Standard Chartered Bank has carried out, a survey that it did for 12 of the most, I would say, fastest growing emerging markets, and Kenya is part of that survey. And show you what the result of that survey has been. That's the report has just come out in the last 1 or so months, and it's available on Standard Chartered website. It's called Carbon Dated. And also I will then talk about sustainable investing. And I think that will then connect what Jacqueline has mentioned in terms of what are some of the things we can start doing ourselves to either take advantage of the reshaping of the world coming through from COP26 or earlier sessions, Paris Accord, and all that. And where can you place your money to be part of the change that is happening? So if we can just get into it. And the first thing I would like to talk about is about the report. So we issued this report about Carbon Dated. So the details of it are available on our website. And essentially what we were looking to see is how are the multinational companies looking to reduce carbon emission? We all know that most international companies have committed either 2030 or 2050 or any of the timeline in between there, that they will go carbon neutral. And they have been public about it. You've seen global CEOs making commitment to say that my company will go carbon neutral. And then we then thought, what does that actually mean? So we realized that through the survey that most of the carbon emissions for these multinationals are actually in their supply chain. So it's not them who are actually emitting it, but it's the suppliers that obviously supply them, the raw materials, or it could be in their distribution channels in terms of transporting goods to the market. And we saw that then there was a connection between, the global companies and I would say the SMEs, because SMEs, medium-sized enterprises, small enterprises are the ones who actually supply or actually distribute goods from these companies. And then we then went a little bit further and asked, how much is the volume or value of that economy? Is there an opportunity or a threat to emerging market suppliers? So emerging market suppliers, including Kenya, so we surveyed 12 markets. So if you could keep going, and I will show you some bit of more information. So what we found out is if the suppliers do not integrate climate change goals, they risk missing out in $1.6 trillion of an economy in the next 3 years. I think I would like for a moment to take a second and get that to sink in, because for other decision makers we have in this room, if you're not thinking about climate change and net zero goals, these companies you supply or the company you distribute for will actually tell you, no, we're not going to take your service anymore. And the ticket is big. It's $1.6 trillion, and this is across 12 markets. 96 of the multinationals actually have put a target by 2050. So actually the clock is already ticking, and that 73% of all the emissions for these companies are actually from their suppliers, as I already mentioned. Now, 66% of these multinationals says that the most important thing is they want to be able to measure, okay, where these secondary sources of emissions are coming up. And of course, we realize there's obviously certain data gaps, because people could easily do some greenwashing. So you say, oh, it's green because it's painted green, but of course, if you cut inside, it's not green. So there's need for people to be conscious about, is the measurement right? Okay, because look, we are committing, the world is committing to certain goals, then we don't want just to paint over them and then move on. And of course, as part of the survey, we found 56% of those, really did not have the right knowledge to be able to know what it is they need to do to reduce their emission. So there's quite a lot of work to be done, by ourselves, women on board, and all the stakeholders to help in this area. So I'll just keep rolling a few more insights out of the report, and just go to the next slide. And then what you found is, now here are the 12 markets that were surveyed, and you can actually see 31% of all of the multinationals are saying that they have zero tolerance, meaning 3 out of 10 will actually say, sorry, we won't take your supplies anymore. Sorry, you're out of our distributor book because you have not complied to this net zero or ESG type of goals. And of course, Kenya was surveyed as part of that survey. You can see China, India are up there, but obviously Kenya is part of that, and of course Nigeria and other markets that are surveyed there. So this, you can see, these are all emerging markets, and these generally are the suppliers of the world or the consumers of the world. So one way or the other, this country will be impacted, and business in this country will be impacted if they do not make the change. Let's keep rolling more information. Let's go to the next slide. Now, some more data about Kenya. So specifically on Kenya, $3.9 billion, that's significant for our Kenyan economy. So they are saying suppliers who do not partner now on goals around climate change are actually going to lose $3.9 billion, $4 billion of export revenue. You can imagine, our tea industry, our flower industry, tourism and all that kind of thing. 87 of the multinationals are saying that they have actually set targets for their suppliers in Kenya, okay? And they're asking an average of 35% reduction by 2-3 years coming, 2025. So you can see it's actually like people, these multinationals are forcing, because they made the commitment and they know that, 73% of their emission is actually coming from the supply chain. So they're actually forcing the supply chain to actually also change. Now, see, 65% of these, and you can see all these numbers, 2, 3 out of 5, 4 out of 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 kind of figures. They are saying that I'm willing to pay a premium. 2/3 of these multinationals, in the Unilevers, the Coca-Colas, the Diageo, they're willing, I'm going to pay a premium for your product if you actually transition. So they are giving an incentive to the suppliers. And of course, some of them, about half, slightly more than half, are saying, actually, I want to partner. I want to help you as you develop. It could be in capacity, it could be in cash in kind, grants, so that they can help the small enterprises actually transition to this space. So this is actually here in Kenya. These are companies, multinational in Kenya, actually saying about their supply chain here in Kenya. And of course, you can imagine this is across all the other of Africa. So let's keep going. So I'll not cover so much about that. You can just keep going to the next slide. I just want to save a little bit more time for the next area. So you can see when it comes to the issue of net zero, the multinationals have made a commitment and they're forcing that commitment into their supply chain. Okay, so you see how it is coming down. So you're sitting in board, you're sitting in decision, you have to be asking that question. How is this organization transitioning to net zero? Because actually there's a business revenue, there's a cost to it if you don't. Okay, there's a clear opportunity cost to it if you don't. It's 2/3 of the companies are saying, you know what, or rather a third of the companies are saying, I'll strike you off from my distributor or supply list, or I will not give you an incentive in terms of paying a little bit of premium. So your product will not be able to pick as much profit as those of your counterpart. Now I want to switch gears now, and I want to go now to you as an individual. You now, Jacqueline, ZP, Paul. Now, what can you do in this sustainability area, in this ESG area? Now, we've did another survey last year, right after COVID. This came out around August, September of last year, and we wanted to seek what the impact of COVID-19 and people's perception around ESG and sustainable investing. Sustainable investing has always been there for a period of time, but we wanted to see, are people starting to become a little bit more conscious? So, and some of the things in terms of just introducing the topic, is that there are kind of 4 key categories of ESG investing. One is just saying, please don't give me companies that are in certain areas. So it's like a negative, select and say, I don't want a company in tobacco. I don't want a company in oil and gas. I don't want a company in this industry and all of that, right? Because those are kind of thought or seen to be industries that are polluting, so to speak, right? I don't want to invest in coal and gas and oil and gas, coal and all that, coal energy. Now, the other, now you start getting sophistication, no? The ESG integration. So here is where you're following what Jacqueline actually described. And I was keenly listening her saying that when they want to invest in a company, they look at how they have set their ESG goals. How are they scoring? And based on that, they say, should we invest, should we not invest? And if we invest, what are some of the things we'll actually do to make sure we change the culture of that organization to become ESG focused? So that's the next area. Now, then the next, the third level of investing is now you start to focus on sustainability. And now you're trying to look at the marine development goals and saying, I want to invest in clean energy. I want to go to education. So I want to select companies so this is positive selection. I want to select companies that are exposed in this area because they are doing the right, they are positive into the world. And last but not least, and I would say the higher level now, is where you start impact investing. You actually want to make a real change. You want to make a change. So you actually go and say, I'm not just investing, I want to be active to make a change so that the companies can actually make a difference in this world. So we keep going. So that's just generally how sustainable investing is, and that's how we, the various approaches are. So let's go to the next slide. Now, out of this survey, we found that 90% of all the people surveyed said, yes, they were conscious about sustainable investing. 42%, just slightly less than half, said, I'm actually considering allocating 5 to 15% of my net worth into sustainable investing in the next 3 years. You see, these are actually people saying, almost half of them, 4 in 10, I actually going to make an action. I will allocate my portfolio, my investable assets, 5 to 15% to actually get in this area. Okay, and then we ask ourselves, then if you can keep going to the next step. Let's keep going. All right, then we ask a little bit more. Okay, of the UN Social Development Goals, which one would you allocate? Which one do you want to invest in? Okay, and this is what's quite revealing, because about 50% of the survey said that clean water and sanitation was very important to them, and they would like to invest in that area. Good health and well-being, of course, you can imagine after COVID-19 or during COVID-19, people became more conscious about their health and their well-being. Okay, so they said, I would like to invest in companies that are focused around health and well-being. Climate action. Now, I'm sure if we had done the survey now, actually climate action will probably take a little bit further, because there's been a lot of awareness out there, around the climate change. Because you can imagine, since then, or just around that time, Biden recommitted in the Paris Accord, and of course appointed, somebody to be able to head that. And you can see the commitment that the US is making. Right now, the House of Representatives have passed $1.7 trillion to go in rebuilding America in a shape that is sustainable. So I think that now would have, actually gone a notch higher. And of course, quality education. So you can actually see how the top 5 goals, the top 5 areas that our investors that we surveyed, and this is in many markets, say that we are interested in this area. And this then helped us to think, what solutions then should we be providing our investors when it comes to sustainable investing? So now, the last but not least slide, if you go into it, okay, and here we are saying now, okay, having known this, having known that climate change is very important, carbon neutral or net zero is this important for multinational, is gonna be important for for the supply chain as well. Also looking at our investors across the globe and asking them, what are the most important investment areas for them. Then we've come up with what then should Paul, Jacqueline, Zippy, and all of us do to future-proof our investment, And future-proof means that you are now investing in the next area of growth, in the area that is sustainable, okay? And, looking at the overall theme of the investment space, there are a couple of areas that we've looked at. Number one is, obviously, interest rates across the world have come down significantly, and they've stayed low for a very long time. I mean, if you're in Europe, you pay the bank to keep your money. So they call negative interest rates. So you pay the bank, so you open an account at the bank in Europe, you actually pay the bank to keep your money, so you don't earn anything. Of course, the US, if a bank pays you more than 25 cents, for every $100 you put, you'll actually be very, very lucky, right? And in most cases, actually, they pay zero. In Kenya, I mean, before you go to a bank, you want a fixed deposit, you would have gotten, a 10%, maybe a 12%, maybe a 9%. Right now, actually, it's much lower. So you've seen generally yields have come down, interest rates for financial products have come down, and they are barely beating inflation. So your value of wealth is actually dissipating away because of inflation. Okay, and of course, the government have constantly ensure that they do that to ensure that the economy keep supported, because if interest rates were higher, with the impact of COVID-19, then of course there will be a bigger issue, okay? So governments have put the rate down, they've kept putting the rate down to see if they can jack the economy to start stimulate the economy to start getting productive and ward off the impact of COVID-19. Another way of future proofing, so you know that is the backdrop. So you're gonna have to start thinking of how do you start getting a little bit of yield from your investment now. But in terms of the future, what are we looking at? Of course, there's destructive technologies and those are there, you know, electric vehicles, modern technology, and all that, fintech and all that. But I think the area that I really wanted to talk about today is around investing in climate change, okay? I think it is very clear to us now that we need to hold a certain level of a portfolio, could be 5%, 15% in these future areas, alternative energy, wind, solar, water. It is very important. And this has been advised by the fact that our clients are telling us, and also we can see the direction that the global companies are taking and the change. Of course, global companies and governments, of course, global companies and government are taking, and we know now that this area is what we need to be asking our investors to start allocating their portfolio so that they can capture the growth there. Now, you may ask, so Paul, tell me, how do I invest in wind? How do I invest in solar? How do I actually get a piece of this? How do I go? Can I buy a solar company? Where is it, right? Now, I'll tell you this. We have up to, actually, I just realized I thought there were 17 funds that we have, but actually my colleague just corrected me and said we actually have 19 different investment vehicles into sustainability. They are in terms of water, and I'll just tell you this. So we got companies. We have mutual funds investing in. So one is Allianz Global Sustainability Fund, and this invests in companies that are obviously, as Jacqueline has mentioned, looking at those areas of sustainability and saying, is this company ESG compliant or ESG sensitive? So that's one. Then we got, one of the funds is 91 Global Environment Equity Climate Change Fund. So again, focused on environment. We have future transport. Interesting. So what is the future of transport? Sustainable transportation. So electric vehicles, autonomous and digitally connected vehicles. So again, we have an investment in that space. We have another one, and then I'm checking my clock to ensure that I still stay within the 20 minutes. So we have Newberger connectivity, 5G connectivity. So these are looking into the future technology, which will support a lot of green economy, okay, connected green economy. And we have, other thematic healthcare innovation, for example, focused on the healthcare and the wellness that we mentioned that clients are very interested to know, that their well-being is very important coming up from that survey. We have an Allianz Global Water Fund. So this focus on water, clean water. We found that's one of the things that our clients are very interested. We have smart energy. So, and the list goes on. And really, somebody could ask me, okay, how much would this cost? Do I need a lot of money to get a piece of this? And the answer is, actually, no, you can actually make an impact by just having $1,000, which you can actually put in and start investing, or even $100 per month, which you can actually put it in a plan that goes in for a period of time. I would like to stop there. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be part of this forum. I'm available for question and answer. And even after this session, if you'd like to engage me in any other way so that we can understand a little bit more of what can we actually do today to focus ourselves and help in this ESG agenda. Thank you, and back to you, Zippy.
Paul, thank you so much. I can confess that Jackie and I, when we were speaking, we were wondering, now how do we tie this together? We almost thought the topic was so long until I spoke to you. You've done justice. We are very grateful. I want to ask that we release a poll that has, I think, 1 or 2 questions so that the participants can quickly respond, and then we'll do the Q&A after this. So Hannah, please help us. We have about 25 minutes to go. So prepare your questions, give us your suggestions. Hannah, thank you. 30 seconds to go. Ten seconds to go. So thank you. Can we have the results? I'm sure Paul is keen. So 73% have indicated that you can invest 10,000 shillings monthly with StanChart. 14% say 1 million, another 14% say 100,000. I think we must have somebody who has abstained or something like that. Thank you very much for the poll. So my takeaway from here is to multinationals. If we want to trade by 2025 and recoup the necessary profits, we have both a carrot and a stick. So there is the regulation and there is the use of the principles. So now we understand why we are addressing this topic today, because both the multinationals and the SMEs and MNSs are seated here. So the supply chain and the users are on this platform. We need to have a very serious conversation. We cannot compete. We can only partner to survive. The other takeaway is the urgency towards net zero goals. You either lose to be part of the 1.6 trillion US or you become a partaker. The choice is yours. In fact, the third choice that is politely being put is in 3 years, the deadline will have been pushed and we'll either be doing what we are doing or we have to find other things. I don't know which those things are going to be. So the multinationals are being told, please take a center stage. SMEs are being told there has to be intentions in the discussions about climate change. We've been told that 3 out of 10 are willing to deliver the net zero. Are you part of the 3 out of 10 or are you still part of the 7 out of 10? This is a choice we have to make. We have to plot and agree, if I come home to Kenya, whether we'll be part of the 3.9 billion. I saw Nigeria, I saw South Africa, I saw Kenya in the top countries that were given. There was a lot of Asia. I want to ask a question to the panelists for us to let us know. What is the relationship between compliance and infrastructure development? Because a lot of infrastructure is being done by China, and we don't know how well they are rated towards the net zero. And Africa is a recipient of Chinese infrastructure. So we need to know where we are lying on that particular space. We've also been told that as board members, which is what qualifies us to be here, when we go to our boards, we need to advocate for best practices. Are we still doing business as usual? Or are we planning to bring a new conversations into the table? And because change is not always easy, we need to start now so that our businesses are compliant, our businesses remain in business, so that as board members, we are not told when it was your turn, when you served tenure, you did not advise us. So board members, we will need to go back to our boards, examine what we are doing, and work with our boards towards compliance. We have been told that investments are likely to do anti-selections for companies that are listed. If somebody is going to make their investment, they are now having to anti-select based on only one thing. Do you have clean energy or are you supporting it? Real change is going to be in the environment. So whatever we do, we are being forced, coerced, or encouraged to do things that are going to help us save our environment. We have been told that whatever investments will be happening by 2025, the return on our investment, we need to clearly look at wind, solar, water, because that is the next kid in the block. So companies will need to recalibrate their thoughts. Companies will have to rethink their decisions. We will go back to our boardrooms and examine our strategies. Our visions will have to have pillars that are going to support our survival. I now want to open the session for anybody who has a question to ask. There are some responses on the chat, and so the floor is open. If the panelists have something else they would like to add as we wait, you are free to give a comment or two as we wait.
Okay. May I give a comment, Zippy?
Yes, please.
As I was listening to Paul's really, really comprehensive presentation, thank you very much. It brought a thought to my mind. I'm sure some of you who were around 10 or 15 years ago, remember when we were sitting there and we were having this discussion about corporate social responsibility? Yeah? And we're saying, is the business case, and it was a softly, well, it's a nice to have. We use some of our profits so people think we are nice people, and we support some of these issues. On reflection, the good boards, I think, who were proactive, who really, you remember the important and urgent category, when you have the matrix of important and urgent, they put it as important, but not yet urgent. And they proactively looked at that and did something. They're the ones, I think, that were ahead on this ESG issue. Because corporate social responsibility was about, kind of what corporates do socially. So the boards who were, and I think that's where we want to be. We want to be those proactive people who regard it as important. It's getting urgent now, but maybe isn't as urgent as it could be. So to answer the question that you asked, Zippy, about compliance, some of these things, they're not legal compliance yet because we don't have these laws. But why wait for the laws? Why not be the social change people who really move this ahead, because it makes good business sense? And the businesses that we've seen that do this, they also get the favorable exposure. I put in the chat there, I know one organization that is actually supporting schools, but also planting trees. That's a deforestation issue for Sierra Leone, but the other issues that the carbon and the climate ones are also just as important, if not more important. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jacqueline. That's a very good starting point. It's not even a stopping. And I want to ask, sometimes when we want to serve in boards, we want to serve in those huge boards, the multinationals. What is the incentive? Think about the primary school you attended. Think about the secondary school you attended. What can you do? What contribution can you do? A child reports to school in Form 1, they spend 4 years in that school. Even 2 rainy seasons in Kenya, that child planted 2 trees in the hope that one survives. Each child will leave an average of 4 trees at the 4 years. And the story continues because most schools will use firewood to cook. So there are many ways we can improve. But I want to ask a question to Jacqueline. Who should save the planet? That's an elephant in the house. Unpack for us, how can the women seated here save the planet? How can the SME save the planet, whether education, whether, just tell us, challenge us, how we can save the planet, how we should save the planet.
I think all of us have a responsibility, and anything that we do during the day, as you quite rightly said, that the small things that we can do that can make a difference, really small things. And if a million people are doing those small things, that's a million efforts each day. Just little things around sanitation, around water, as you said, around supporting education, even the use of plastics. we're in awe in Sierra Leone. We go to Rwanda and say, yeah, they can do it. The difference it makes if we recycle plastics, the damage that plastics make. We are blessed with the best beaches in the world in Sierra Leone. Come to Sierra Leone, the best beaches. But the plastics, the damage they do to the fishing industry. I need to stop. You're getting me all excited, Zippy.
That was the whole idea. So I would like Paul to share some thoughts on COP26. Just unpack it for us in Wanjiko language.
Yeah, so thank you, Zippy, for that. I think for me is global leaders have realized the urgency to make a change, and they have said, let's congregate and determine and chart our way forward. But this is just step one. It's albeit the most important step because leadership matters, right? Leaders give direction to the rest of us to say which direction we should go. And I think for me, the next step and most significant one is to create sufficient awareness across the entire planet. And of course, in this session, we are seated as leaders, having understood that there is urgency when it comes to climate change, and there is commitment by government and cooperation about achieving net zero. Anywhere from 2050, 2060, we're going to have to start acting now. And for Wanjiko, for me, it should be as simple as this. And I'll give you a very brief story. From the village where I come from, I decided to do something very basic, which was to become sustainable on water and to become sustainable on power. So I just spent a little bit money, not too much. I got 10,000 liters worth of a tank, and with a tin roof, and I was able to collect water every time it came down, and then put a few solar panels, just about 1,000 watts, and I'm able to have lighting in the place. Now, at first I thought that the lighting will not be enough, and I will need to supplement it from time to time. But now I've learned for 4 years, I never run out of water, and I've never run out of power for lighting. Very simple. People actually get surprised that is in the village, and I never run out of water. 2 seasons in a year are sufficient for all the water consumption that happens in that, place. There is livestock, and there are people who live there. It's so amazing that we actually got a lot of water if we only collect it and harvest it. The sun shines across Africa, morning to the evening, and we just see it, probably complain when it's too hot and let it go. I think we need to educate Wanjiko and support her to be able to make very simple installation. And I know there are companies that are doing that already. Very simple installation, as opposed to, okay, we're going to pipe the water to the village. It's going to cost a lot of money to pipe kilometers and kilometers, miles and miles of water. Well, the water actually comes from the sky. All we need is to have a tin roof and a place to collect it. We're going to say, oh, I'm going to bring electricity from the city. I'm not going to, line it up all the way to a small hut in the village. But actually, that is such an expensive endeavor to put electricity in every home. Suppose you just had, 1 kilowatt of power or thereabout for each of the home with a small little battery and some lighting bulb, and their power is. I can tell you one more example, that most households across Africa has an animal, either chicken, they have goats or cows. With very small installation that I've figured out, you can actually put biogas that would actually do all the cooking you can possibly do in the village. But look, we've let years after years, people destroy the forest looking for firewood. Okay, and then we spend all this money trying to replant the forest, fencing the forest, doing all those things to prevent the people from getting into the forest. That is not the way to approach it. Solve the need for power, for energy, for water, and people will live harmoniously. They won't have to destroy the forest. They won't have to do it. So I think we just need, as leaders now, to start influencing these COP26 goals and declarations into a local way of interpreting them, and in a way that they're implementable. And within a very short time, right? We don't take too long. That is the impact we're actually going to make. Sorry, Zip, you on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. I think this topic needs to be unpacked again so we can discuss practical, simple, inexpensive ways of getting to where COP26 wants us to go. We don't have to be in Glasgow. We just need to be in Paul's village with one chicken, one tin roof, and a good tank, and the rains will come and the plants will sustain. I saw comments on the chat, switching off lights when one leaves a room, segregating waste, garbage, and disposing of separately and appropriately. I want to ask somebody who has done a very good comment just before we wind up, Wanjiko Wanyeki, please unmute and just give us on a 2-minute testimony how you managed to move from here. Testimonies are powerful. They are not just given in churches. They can also be given in Women's on Board. Could you enable Wanjiko to unmute?
Yeah, hi, thanks so much. Because a lot of our branches, the power is, and I'm based in Zambia. I'm Kenyan, but I'm based in Zambia. The power situation is very dicey, so we always had backup power using generators. And as part of our looking at these same SG goals, we call them social performance goals, we looked at it in terms of what can we actually do, and we invested in solar and moved the backup power from generator power and installed solar panels in all our branches. I'm in the banking industry, and it's been working brilliantly. And our goal is to move 100% to solar so that electricity is now our backup. So those are one of the things that we did.
Okay, thank you very much, Wanjiko. Anyone else? We're just about to wind up. Any last questions? Any last questions? Today we are back to back. We have another session running not too long from here. Yes, somebody has said we wish solar can be made practical in the villages. You know, we live in a country of monopoly called KPLC, where the power, the way what you got with the power last year is not what you're getting this year. And we have so much sun that is burning us. We have people who sit on those boards. We have people who sit in other boards. We want to take policy to unpack it, to be practical. The question is not who can afford and who cannot afford. The question is, if we don't save the planet, we will hang corporately together. It hasn't rained, we are in November. It doesn't matter who has money, who does not have money. We are in a dire situation. What can we do? So with those few remarks, I want to thank Jacqueline and Paul. I also want to thank all the ladies and gentlemen, the 49 of you that have stayed, and want to wish you well for the next of the proceedings. And I want to take it back to Hannah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hannah, we are done. Do we leave the session or do I take it back to Catherine?
Yeah, Miss Catherine can make some closing remarks, and
Catherine,
then we
please
drop
make some
off
closing
to
remarks.
join
Thank
for
you.
the next one.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine.
Oh dear, I wasn't prepared to do this, but this topic is so important. And the reason it's so important is because it touches each and everyone's life in all spheres, you know, because when you unpack each of those pillars, you basically will find that you're talking about the totality of life. And so it's the responsibility of each of us to make sure that we are taking action in each of the pillars. Allow me to say this, that as board members again, and I said this earlier about our strategy, even before we start measuring our ESG impact, we must put in place the goals that we are working towards. So every board must have ESG goals that are balanced across the 3 pillars, and then start to measure that, and also start to measure impact. So outcomes and impact as well, so that you can know whether you're making, making any steps forward. I mean, I follow companies like Uber, and there are so many complaints against Uber, but they keep reporting. They have an ESG report. They reported on ESG last year. If you Google, you'll get the report. They have a report for this year. The question is, are they reporting for the sake of reporting, or are they actually making an impact? So it's important that we actually track impact as well as outcomes. Thank you, Paul. Always amazing listening to you. I love the way you unpacked it. No wonder you are my banker. Jacqueline, no wonder you're my sister from another mother. Thank you so, so much for all the learning, and we never tire hearing from both of you. Thank you so much. God bless. And Zippy, thanks for good moderation. That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. Over.
or we can sort of embrace technology and the changes, at our pace.
Yes,
You
yes.
get at our pace. Yeah, Mercy has shared, she said it depends on your area of expertise. That's my 2 cents. However, Mercy and William, you can probably chip in briefly so that you can take up other questions. Mercy, do you have any other, or you've over?
Sorry, go ahead.
You comment on that, and also the first question, kindly.
Maybe I'm